On a routine inspection in November of 2025, engineers crawling beneath Canada's flagship bridge spotted something that shouldn't exist on a structure barely 6 years old. Rust. Not surface staining, not cosmetic weathering. Genuine corrosion working its way into joints that were never supposed to leak. The Samuel de Champlain Bridge, the most expensive infrastructure project in Quebec's history, designed to stand for 125 years, was already failing one of its most basic tests. And the reason came down to something almost insulting in its smallness. The contractor hadn't sealed the joints properly. This new bridge was supposed to be the answer. The whole point of building it was to bury the embarrassment of what came before. The original Champlain Bridge opened in 1962 with a price tag of just $35 million, a bargain in any era. Engineers expected 50 years of service. They got 57, but only because Canada spent the final decade of that lifespan in a state of constant emergency. Hundreds of millions of dollars in repairs. 300 sensors monitoring the structure for signs of catastrophic failure. A 75-ton steel superbeam bolted on overnight in 2013, just to keep traffic moving across one of the busiest bridges on the continent. By the end, the country's most used river crossing was being held together with what amounted to engineering duct tape. Ottawa promised the replacement would be different. Smarter, tougher, built to outlive everyone alive today. Which is why what just happened beneath the new bridge matters far more than a few rust spots ever should. To understand why the new bridge matters, you have to understand what swallowed the old one. The original Champlain was a victim of cost-cutting from the moment it was conceived. The Pratley engineering firm designers of the Jacques Cartier Bridge wanted steel girders for the entire span. The federal government wanted cheaper. So a French concrete girder design was selected on price alone, a structure described later by its own would-be designer as concocted like a piece of knitting, tightly tied together with internal tension cables that could never be inspected. Once the concrete cured. Then came the salt. Montreal sits in one of the coldest, dampest urban climates on the planet. Within weeks of opening, the city was salting the bridge to prevent ice. Within 30 years, the rebar inside the concrete was corroding from the inside out. By the bridge's 50th birthday, an independent assessment used the phrase unacceptable and indeterminable risk of catastrophic collapse. Canada didn't replace the bridge because it wanted to. Canada replaced the bridge because the alternative was waiting for it to fall. When Ottawa signed off on the replacement in 2015, they did something unusual. They handed the entire project to a private consortium called Signature on the St. Lawrence Group, through a 30-year public-private partnership. Build it, operate it, maintain it, take it back when the contract expires. The base construction cost came in at $3.977 billion, the lowest qualifying bid. Add the new Ile des Sœurs Bridge. Add the widening of Autoroute 15. Add the demolition of the old Champlain at $400 million. Add the corridor improvements and the related approach roads. The total program approached $5.5 billion before a single car crossed the new span. Factor in 3 decades of contracted maintenance payments to the consortium, ongoing federal oversight costs, and the Bonaventure Expressway repairs being bundled into the same logistical zone, and Canadian taxpayers are committed to something north of $7 billion before the meter stops running. The bridge itself opened in June 2019 to enormous fanfare. 240 meters of cable-stayed main span, 168-meter tuning fork tower, stainless steel reinforcement, high-performance concrete, designed to resist seismic activity, soil liquefaction, ship collisions, and ice loading. It was supposed to be permanent in a way Canadian infrastructure rarely zizzes. And then, 6 years later, the rust appeared. The defect found in 2025 sounds boring until you understand what it threatens. The Samuel de Champlain is built around prefabricated steel box girders, enormous hollow beams that carry the weight of every car, truck, bus, and commuter train that crosses the river. Where these girders meet, joints are sealed against weather. The seal is not optional. The seal is the entire reason the structure can survive winter in Quebec. Water that enters those joints freezes, expands, refreezes, contracts. Salt-laden runoff seeps into seams that should be airtight. And once corrosion starts inside a steel box section, it does not announce itself politely. It eats outward. By the time it shows on the surface, it has usually already eaten through the inside. Inspectors at the Jacques Cartier and Champlain Bridges Incorporated, the federal crown corporation overseeing the structure, confirmed in late 2025 that joint sealing had not been applied correctly during construction. The repair cost falls on the consortium, not the public, because the maintenance contract requires it. That sounds reassuring. It isn't, because the question that nobody at the press conference wanted to answer was simple. If they got the joints wrong, what else did they get wrong? That hasn't shown up yet. Engineers had a single mandate from the federal government: build something that would not embarrass Canada twice. The 125-year design life wasn't a marketing slogan. It was a contractual benchmark baked into the bidding process, used to justify the price tag to a skeptical parliament. To hit that lifespan, the consortium employed materials the original bridge never had: stainless steel rebar in critical zones, high-performance concrete with reduced permeability, drainage systems engineered specifically to flush salt water away from structural elements. None of that protects you from a worker forgetting to seal a joint. None of it. And here's the harder problem. A structure designed to last 125 years that develops a flaw in year 6 does not simply lose a few years off its lifespan. Corrosion compounds. The damaged section ages faster than the material around it. Repairs introduce new joints, new failure points, new inspection burdens. The old Champlain Bridge taught Canada exactly this lesson: that small mistakes in the early life of a major bridge become permanent, expensive headaches by middle age. The new bridge was meant to be the proof that Canada had finally learned. November 2025 raised a question Ottawa is not yet willing to answer in public. Quote, "The cost of the new bridge, and you'll get different numbers from different sources." The federal government cites $4.2 billion. The construction consortium reports $3.977 for its winning bid. The Auditor General of Canada documented over $500 million in avoidable costs caused by planning delays. Money that vanished before construction even began because Ottawa waited too long to commit. Add the demolition of the old span at $400 million. Add the new Ile-de-Sur Bridge. Add the highway widening. Add the contracted maintenance payments stretching to 2049. Add the Clément Bridge repairs and Bonaventure Expressway rehabilitation tied directly to the same corridor. The honest figure for what Canadians have committed to keep this single transportation link working approaches $7 billion across the project's life. That is not a hypothetical number. It is a sum already partially spent and contractually obligated. To put it in perspective, $7 billion exceeds Canada's entire annual federal allocation for many of its housing programs. It is on the same order as the planned Coast Guard fleet replacement. It is by any measure the most expensive piece of transportation infrastructure in Quebec history. And the consortium that built it, the partnership designed specifically to bring private discipline to public engineering, somehow left a ceiling job undone. Here is what Canada does not have. There is no parallel bridge under construction. There is no second corridor in advanced planning. There is no contingency span being prefabricated in a yard, somewhere waiting to be assembled if the Samuel de Champlain ever needs to close. The Jacques Cartier Bridge, just upstream, is itself more than 90 years old and currently undergoing its own multi-section steel rehabilitation program. The Honoré Mercier Bridge to the south carries far less capacity and is already congested at peak hours. The Louis-Hippolyte Lafontaine Tunnel on the other end of the island has been in major refurbishment since 2020. If the Samuel de Champlain were forced to close, even partially, during a busy season, the regional economy would absorb immediate losses measured in tens of millions of dollars per day. $20 billion in annual Canada-United States trade flows through this corridor. 137,000 vehicles cross daily. The REM commuter rail line, opened in 2023, runs across the bridge's center deck. Closing it does not just inconvenience drivers, it severs Montreal from a portion of its own transit network. Federal planning documents acknowledge that losing the bridge would be a national-scale economic event. They do not propose a backup. The official position is that the bridge will not need a backup because the bridge will not fail. That was also the official position about the bridge that came before it for most of its life. The Champlain story is not isolated. Across Canada, more than 37% of transportation infrastructure is in some state of deterioration, and over 12% is rated in critical condition. The numbers come from the federal government's own assessments. Decades of harsh weather deferred maintenance and a political reluctance to fund replacements before crisis hits have created a country where bridges, highways, and tunnels are aging faster than they are being upgraded. Quebec alone has dozens of structures built in the same construction boom that produced the original Champlain, many now approaching or exceeding their intended service life. Ontario faces similar pressures with the Burlington Skyway and the Gardiner Expressway. British Columbia is locked in a long argument over the future of the Massey Tunnel. The Samuel de Champlain was supposed to demonstrate a new era, one where Canadian infrastructure was built for the long haul, paid for through long-term private partnerships engineered with 21st century materials. If the flagship of that approach is showing rust at age 6, the credibility of the entire strategy comes into question. Right now, the consortium has a contractual incentive to fix problems quickly and quietly. After 2049, when the contract expires, that incentive disappears. What remains is the same federal crown corporation with the same long history of underestimating bridge problems until they become emergencies. By the end of this decade, two paths are possible. In one, the joint repairs hold. The consortium absorbs the cost. The bridge proves itself worthy of the 125 years it was promised, and November 2025 becomes a footnote in the long, boring history of routine maintenance. In the other path, more defects surface. Repairs introduce new vulnerabilities. The consortium and the federal government begin a slow legal argument over which problems are construction errors and which are normal wear. Costs escalate. Public confidence in P3 bridges erodes. And Canada, with no replacement plan and no political appetite to start, one drifts toward the same emergency that consumed the original bridge, one bolted-on superbeam at a time. The truth is, this country built the most ambitious bridge in its history, specifically to avoid repeating its biggest infrastructure failure. 6 years in, the early signs are not what anyone expected. The country that knew better than anyone how this story ends is watching it begin again. If you want to keep tracking what happens next on this bridge and on the dozens of other Canadian megaprojects entering their reckoning years, make sure you're subscribed. The next update on the Samuel de Champlain might come from a press conference. It might come from a leaked inspection photo. Either way, it will come. And by then, the country will be a little further down a road it told itself it would never travel again.